Hi guys, welcome back to the Mina Does Art Stuff YouTube channel, and my name is Mina and I do art stuff on this channel. Okay, welcome back to another episode in the colour comparison series. Today we are taking a look at Sap Green. I have a large collection of Sap Green colours, unsurprisingly, because it is one of my favourites. And yeah, so let's dive on in. We are going to start with probably one of my least favourite Sap Greens, is the Schminker Sap Green. I don't know what it is. Schminker's greens are a bit hit and miss for me. So their Sap Green is just a little bit too garish. Make sure I get the right one. There we go. Just a little bit too unnatural. Like, I associate Sap Greens with a very natural looking colour of green, and this is not it. This is not it. This is just too artificial looking, in my opinion, and it's not a colour I would use in its current form. And there again, Sap Green is one of those colours that is typical, you know, I have one example of a single pigment version, but it is usually considered a convenience mix green, and if it's a convenience mixture, I want it to be convenient and happy to use, be a colour that I would be happy to use straight out of the pan and not have to mix it for it to be usable. And this is a colour I feel like I would have to mix it in order to get a shade that is usable for me, and that's not what I want from my Sap Green. So not a fan of the Schminker one. Next up we have the Turner Sap Green. Oh, I forgot to mention, the Schminker one is made up of PY153, which is a yellow, and PG7, which is phthalo green blue shade. And then Turner is made with PG36, that's phthalo green yellow shade, and PY110. This is definitely more natural sort of tone and shade of green than the Schminker one. I think I also forgot to mention I am using Arches 100% cotton cold pressed paper and my Da Vinci Colineo size 8 round brush. I will have links to the paper brush as well as all the paints that I'm showing you today in the description box below. Next up we have Mello Sap Green. This is a mixture of, this one's also a little bit brighter than I would normally go for, but still not bad. This is a mixture of PG36 and PY150. Sorry, I don't want to lose you off the screen there. Yeah, this is definitely still brighter than what I would go for now, but in my opinion, still a bit more usable than the Schminker one. That PY150 shining through in the wash. Next up we have the Holbein Sap Green. This is a mixture of 3 pigments, PY150, so that nickel azo yellow, PG7 phthalo green blue shade, and PR122, so that's quinacridone magenta. This is a really nice natural looking green. It's definitely a Sap Green I like. It's nice dark in the mass tone, it's got a lovely light wash. Good range of values. I like a Sap Green that is a nice rich dark in the mass tone and then a nice bright colour in the when it's washed out. Okay, next up we have Celia Sap Green. This is not my favourite, but I do not dislike it the way I dislike the Schminker one. This is a mixture of PB29, so ultramarine blue, and PY153. So again, I think PY153 is a warm yellow. This was quite opaque, or at least it feels very opaque going down. It feels more like a chromium green oxide type of colour. Sorry if you can hear the background noise, it's raining a lot today. I don't really consider it a sap green, but as a green I like it, but I don't like it as a sap green, if that makes sense. So I like it as a green, but I wouldn't call that sap green. I would call that like chromium oxide hue or something. Next up we have the Windsor & Newton Sap Green. That's this one here. This is a mixture of PG36, so phthalo green yellow shade, and PY110, which I think we saw that mix with Turner. Yeah, so this is the same mixture as the Turner Sap Green, so it's definitely a brighter sap green than some that I really like, although not as bright as the Holbein. It's interesting how different this one looks to the Turner. Next up we have Romansch Small. So I don't actually have their sap green, but I have their Hooker's Green, which in my opinion is more of a sap green than their actual sap green. So this is the one where I'm making an exception to the rule. This is a mixture of PY150, so Nicolazo yellow, and PB27. And I absolutely love this colour. This is definitely one of my favourites. And in my opinion, this is definitely more of a sap green than a Hooker's Green, at least in my experience of those two colours. So yeah, I would consider this to be a sap green. I have White Knight Sap Green. And this one, much like their olive green, is an interesting mix of colours, because do I even have their sap? Oh yeah, there it is. Well, it starts out with a black pigment. You've got PBK 7, you've got PY150, which is that Nicolazo yellow, and PG36, which is that phthalo green yellow shade. Again, this is quite a bright sap green, but still very natural and usable, in my opinion. Although I'd say the Romansch Small one is definitely nicer. Rosa Gallery Sap Green. Oops, sorry, it's off camera. This is PY110, PG7, PBK6. So it is a yellow, phthalo green blue shade, and a black. And sadly, I'm not a fan of that one. It's definitely leaning more on the blue side of green, a lot like the Schminker, but not as bad as the Schminker one in my opinion. It's still usable, but I would have to mix in some yellow to warm it up. Right, next up we have Cause Sap Green. This palette needs a good cleaning. So that's just over here. So their sap green is a mixture of PG36, so that phthalo green yellow shade, PR101, and PY150. If anything, I think their sap green, or this sap green in particular, looks a lot more like an olive green compared to the others. It's a lot more muted. It's still a very natural green, beautiful colour, lovely to paint with, but I'm not sure I would call that a sap green. I would definitely, that would fit in beautifully with my olives. And we have Daniel Smith Sap Green, which I think is this one. Yeah, okay, I'm just going to leave that pan in the palette. This is, or has been, my favourite for a while, and we'll see if it's still my favourite once we finish all of this. This is a mixture of PG7, so phthalo green blue shade, P048 quinacridone burnt orange, and PY150 nickel azo yellow. I kind of think of this as like the quintessential sap green colour. I just love the warmth. It's the perfect balance of warmth and richness while still being natural. Next up, I have two colours from Da Vinci. So I have one which was specially created by Denise Soden called Denise's Green, and then also their Sap Green. So Denise's Green is supposed to be her version of a Sap Green, which is why I've included it in this swatching. So Denise's Green is a mixture of PY129, which is green gold, and PB60, which is Indian Throne Blue. And this is a beautiful mixture. I do really like it. This is a mixture I would do sometimes myself before she came out with this colour, mixing Indian Throne Blue or even Prussian Blue with PY129 gives a beautiful mix, beautiful greens. And then I actually have Da Vinci's Sap Green as well, which is a mixture of PG7, which is phthalo green, blue shade, and PY42, which is yellow ochre. Now their olive green has the exact same pigment combination as well, but obviously in different amounts. Their olive green looks different. Oh, that was the wrong pan. There we go. So again, it's interesting to see that Denise's Green has a much more of a colour value range than the Sap Green from Da Vinci, and it's also warmer, which I kind of prefer, but I do also like the Sap Green. Then we have M. Graham's Sap Green. This is a mixture of PY110 and PG7, which we've not had that particular colour combination so far, so it'd be interesting to see how this looks. Again, this is a fairly muted but very natural colour. It's definitely not as bright as some of the other Sap Greens. And can be a little bit opaque when applied heavily. So the last two colours I don't have in pans, so we're just going to do them out the tube. I'm just going to put a little dot for both and then we will proceed to talk about them. I can't get the lid off my Rembrandt tube of Sap Green, so we're not going to be able to swatch that one today, unfortunately. But we're going to be ending on Hine Sap Green, which is fitting because this is the only single pigment Sap Green I have in this lineup, and that is PG8. It's not a colour you commonly see in professional watercolours these days. Okay, so that was the Rosa Gallery Green, which is PG8, and I'm just going to do the White Nights Green, which is also PG8 underneath it, just so we can see how that looks compared to the Hine Sap Green. So both of these colours are very similar to each other, but they are both darker than the Hine, which is interesting. Alright, I'm going to set this sheet aside to dry now, and we will come back and take a look at this once it's all dried off. Alright guys, swatches are dry and we are back. So, Sap Greens, you can see it's quite a, considering Sap Green is considered a fairly standard colour, there's quite a range of Sap Green here we're looking at. First of all, I will say the core Sap Green really sticks out as being the odd one here. This to me reads more like an olive green than a sap green. If I grab my sheet of olive green swatches, you'll see that I feel like that fits in a lot better into the olive family of colours than it does in the sap greens, but maybe that's just me. I do love this colour as an olive, not a sap green, so I will say that right off the bat. The other one here that's a bit of an odd one out is the Romansch Sap. I don't actually have a sap green by Romansch Sap. I have their Hooker's Green, which I consider to be closer to a sap green than what they have as a sap green, if that makes any sense. So this is definitely a favourite, but it is a slightly different one. I just consider it more as a sap green. Okay, so starting with the top row, this wasn't intentional, but this top row is definitely the brighter colours of sap green for the most part. Do not like the Schminker Sap Green. Tanner Sap Green is nice. Mello Sap Green is a little bit too bright. The Holbein Sap Green is beautiful. Celia Sap Green, it's a pretty colour. It's not a sap green. It has some nice blue granulation separating out over here where I dropped a bit of water on it by accident because of that PB29 in the mix. Windsor & Newton Sap Green, it's okay. It's not my favourite. And then down here we've got the Romansch Sap Green, which I like. The White Knight Sap Green isn't too bad. Don't like it because of that black pigment, and it is a little bit streaky when it goes down. The Rosa Sap Green was quite pretty, but again a little bit on the cool side for what I like in my sap greens. The Core Sap Green, I love it as an olive, not as a sap green. Daniel Smith Sap Green, beautiful, love it. Da Vinci Denise's Green is definitely a favourite. Their Sap Green again has some granulation to it because of it uses that PY42 yellow ochre, so it's not bad, but out of the two I prefer the Denise's Green. I feel like it has a better range of values. Then we have M. Graham Sap Green, which actually here looks quite nice, but it's a little bit more dull, a little bit more muted than some of the others. And then we have the Hine Sap Green, which is PG8. I love this sap green. I think it's beautiful. It's the only single pigment sap green in this range. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering this correctly, the original sap green paint was made from the sap of a particular kind of plant. I think it was like buckthorn, if I might, anyway, some kind of berry plant. And it wasn't a very light fast pigment. Most plant-based pigments were not light fast. And so over the years, different brands have created various mixes to recreate the original sap green. But PG8 is a colour, I can't remember what it was originally used for, but it's used not that frequently now by commercially produced watercolour paints by the big brands. However, it is still comes up in a few brands. So Hine has their PG8 in their sap green. I believe they use it in a few other of their colours as well. But also Rosa Gallery and White Knights also use PG8 as a standalone pigment. Their versions are very similar to each other, and they both call theirs just green. It's not their sap green is different. I have the White Knights here and Rosa Gallery here, so they're different from their sap greens, but they just call it green. It's like a nice deep dark foresty green. Ignore the pigment information there, that's for something else we didn't end up swatching. But these are both PG8 as well, so it looks like PG8 can have a range of shades depending on how it's processed and made. And I know there are some other brands that use PG8 in some of their mixes. I've personally not had an issue with light fastness with PG8, but I know that it has some questionable light fastness issues, so it's up to you whether or not you would want to take that risk in using it, and if you did, you know, take precautions as necessary. But yeah, so these are my favourites. Let me know in the comments below which sap green is your favourite. Do you have one that's a favourite that I haven't even included in this little roundup of colours? Let me know down below. I look forward to hearing from you. Alright, that's it for this one, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!